Hi folks, my name is Flaterectomy and this is the Pixelart time-lapse video of our Ludum Dare 43 entry As of Yet Unnamed. Couldn't think of a title, and then that sort of stuck. I made this game together with Dan van Iperen and MeatMachine. Dan taking care of the programming and MeatMachine making all the music and sound effects, while I took care of the art for the game. Here you can see I started off with some basic characters, just put together the original look, visual style of the game, sort of inspired by Broforce, and then I sort of evolved it into a thing where these characters had big square heads. Kind of liked where it was going, so that stuck. I made a basic walk animation for the bodyguard, not necessary at all at this point, but I just sort of wanted to make something that, you know, breathed some life into the game, to the original version of what it was to be. And I added the president in his car and some background building tiles, so Dan could get started on a basic original prototype. After that I started on some detailed buildings. I like to have some detailed art at the end of day one that I can tweet out and post blog posts with and hopefully generate some interest into our game. You can never really start promoting your game too early, and while it's very basic promotion, it's hopefully going to get some people interested in your product. And it's kind of weird calling this a product, but that's sort of how you have to look at it in order to advertise yourself, which we're notoriously bad at. So you just have to go the extra mile to try and take a couple of extra steps and try and see if you can capture people's interest. Here you can see a brownstone building and some white buildings that are going up, all based on places I've seen using Google Street View in Manhattan in New York. Figured that was a pretty American place to sort of base all this art on. And I did start sort of deviating from the original buildings quite a bit, but it's based on these things. If you're very familiar with New York, you might be able to recognize a building or two. There's a building here that mentions Cybertron and Artax and Dynasty, which are games that we've made before, and I like to put those in as sort of Easter eggs for people to recognize in case they're familiar, and otherwise, you know, they might go back and play some of our earlier titles if they find out that these are actually games we made. And at some point I'm also making a parking garage that has posters on the walls advertising some of the other games that we did, and just our names and other little Easter eggs, which I've basically just lifted out of a previous game, out of iClean Toilet, that had those posters on the walls. I just got them from there and recolored them to fit the color scheme of this title. Put them on the walls and just sort of have something to dress the game up with, and also promote previous work, and hopefully, you know, as I said, have some recognition in case people have played them before. Now, of course, I interrupt detailing sprites to add things that are necessary at the time. So when Dan says, "Well, I really need a bullet," then I will just make a little bullet. I'll put that into the... you see me edit a text file every now and again. That's a JSON file that has the names and coordinates and animation frames for all of the art you see here. I added a bullet entry there and put down the coordinates and size of the frame and everything. And at that point we could start testing the actual projectile system for the game. After that, of course, I went back to more background art and started adding some banners to decorate the buildings with. It is a parade, after all. And I did a couple of basic tiles for the crouch and jump frames for the animation for the bodyguard characters. Eventually, I end up making proper animations for this, but this is just some testing frames, just to get things going with. At this point I'm actually animating something. I'm doing the exhaust flame for the for the missile, which I think is a 5-frame animation. In the end, I end up including it into the actual missile sprite, just to make things easier so we don't have to lock 2 sprites together. However, Dan does that with his mysterious coding magic. And after that, I started animating the bodyguard, the walk animation, the final walk animation. Pretty pleased with how that was going. There's a lot of bouncing up and down and things moving back and forth just to make it feel more alive rather than just having 2 feet moving and nothing else in motion. At that point I also started doing the actual jump. I had him launch himself into the air and then pushing his arms and legs out to cover as much surface area and try and protect the president with. You can also see that I mirrored the animations in the spreadsheet rather than having them mirror in the code. Normally Dan often just mirrors that through code. At this point it was just easier for him if I would just make my own version in the tile sheet, and that actually ended up later on adding a nice little detail because I make a second and eventually a third set of bodyguard animations where they are hurt, they have bandages on, and at one point his arm is in a sling. And now I could, if he's walking back, his arm is actually, the correct arm is in the sling. He's turned around and it's not like his right arm is on his left arm and it doesn't make sense. Which is a really small detail, and definitely for a jam you normally wouldn't really care about that, but I enjoyed going the extra mile with this and just having it make sense visually. We are pretty silly people in general, so we've made our game kind of silly. This is we have an American eagle here, a bald eagle with American flag wings, who will there's a chance he'll explode from your. Well, it's not your corpse. You don't die as a bodyguard, but when you're taken down by a missile, we have red, white, and blue balloons and confetti, and possibly that eagle exploding from what I'll just call your corpse, just to make the sacrifice extra patriotic. None of us, we're not Americans. We're all European. We're 2 Dutch guys and an Englishman. But, you know, we're trying to get in the spirit of this thing. So we're feeling mighty patriotic at this point. Here you also see the bandaged version of the bodyguard. There's a chance after they're hit that they return with bandages on. Doesn't always happen, just to make it a little more special when it does. And if your whole team of bodyguards is all bandaged, then you've really done well. It's probably wouldn't happen very, very quickly. At this point I'm probably AFK having dinner or making coffee or something. Here you see a Secret Service badge I made. I made a little flashing effect in the animation. Original plan was to have those be pickups that you could send your bodyguards into in order to recruit new bodyguards. That ended up getting cut. It's not actually in the game. There you see I have made an animation for Barack Obama as well. On day 1 I promised that I would also include a Barack Obama. Didn't just want to make this a game about Donald Trump. And later on I also end up including George W. Bush and Bill Clinton as president you can protect. Here I've made a little 4-frame hand animation that is overlaid over one of the bodyguards at the start of a round, and it'll show you that you can pull back in order to launch the bodyguard in the opposite direction, and we figured that would also make sense for mouse controls. And here I'm making a helicopter that we figured might be a boss or just might be an encounter. Ended up just being an encounter. And I was quite proud of how it ended up looking. And then the next day we looked at it again and we were like, oh, this doesn't suit the rest of the game. This is a large oval shape, whereas most of the game here is square shapes. So I actually end up starting over, and I'm more happy with a final helicopter that I made, which you can see here start coming into being. than I was with the old helicopter. It really suited the game better. It was a little more cute. Made more sense with the proportions of the bodyguards, for instance, with the big heads and the small bodies. Made a little dangling animation for the bodyguards for when they're hanging from the helicopter, trying to get it to crash down, which would look a lot better than just having the final frame from the jump animation there frozen in time. After that, we needed a graphic for the score screen, so I went all out on that one as well with the patriotism. Made a big bald eagle with American flag wings again, and put him behind a golden shield on which we'd put the final score information. I liked the graphics so much I ended up also using it for the title. I figured it was such a landmark visual. It actually captured the over-the-top patriotism so well that you know, this is something I can sort of promote the game with, just without even showing any of the in-game graphics. Here I've got 1 star made already. I ended up actually placing those over top of the graphic, just to add to the symbolism, I guess. I made different stars. I modified this one for the actual score. Later on, I also replaced the sort of gold with an American flag pattern as well. And here I'm just detailing I think it's an olive branch. I'm not entirely sure. I saw a different name for a plant as well at one point. And I'm not a master of plants, so I'm not sure, but I think it's an olive branch, which I mirror also on the other side, just to give it all that extra oomph and glory. And then I put a little, but also like American flag thing at the bottom that ended up being too long, because that whole graphic is scaled up twice and ended up being higher than the 720 pixels we'd set aside, so I have to actually shrink it down a bit again. And I'm doing these stars for the score and actually replace them with American flag stars because it's not yet American enough, don't you think? Here I've got the limousine, which I wanted to improve from the very start, but it's actually very near the end that I end up detailing it, putting little flag waves in and having the wheels move in different ways. And Dan also made the car bounce up a bit here and there, so there's quite a lot of life in there. These are this is the start of a futile effort where I am making the spectators. We'd always plan to have like spectators at the top and the bottom of the screen to liven the place up and have them, you know, make sense. It's a parade. You have spectators, and we ended up not having time to actually implement those. So this is a number of characters that are on the title sheet but aren't in the game. I tried to like a varying spread of figures and characters to be quite representative. The longer we worked on this game, the more representative we wanted to be. Unfortunately, of course, as I said, it didn't actually end up going into the game. As I said before, we didn't actually end up picking a title, so we stuck to As of Yet Unnamed, and I'd made a variation of this logo in a high res, so to speak, for the day 1 and day 2 blog posts. So I recreated that in pixel art and put a little subtitle underneath it. Of course, backed with the bald eagle again. At this point I feel I'm scrambling a bit, trying to get everything done that I wanted to get in. Sprucing up the logo a bit, and I'm also going to add George W. Bush and Bill Clinton and their animations at this point somewhere. There they are. George Bush scratching his head, Bill Clinton winking at a passerby while he's smoking a cigar. At this point I'm adding the bomb. No actually different gameplay with the bomb. It's just a visual variation on the missile. And we added some buttons to be able to turn off sound and music. And at that point the game was pretty much done. There wasn't much time left. And this is pretty much the last few hours, last hour of the jam. Ended up making the cover image that goes on the Ludum Dare site, using somebody else's cover image to find out where the overlays are that cover up the image unless you scroll over it, and then you have the orange overlay saying whether it's jam or compo that actually stays there, that doesn't get removed, so I'm trying to take that into account for the graphic. That about wraps it up for this video. This is pretty much the end of the game jam you're seeing here. Just doing some final tweaks and making things pretty, but that's it. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to play the game, you can. There's the link in the description of this video. So thank you for watching.